51 highborn she-wolves draped in silk and jewels, and his wolf didn't stir for a single one. Rainer Vryn stood in the great hall of his stronghold, a goblet of wine in hand, watching nobles parade past him like they were performing in some elaborate mating ritual. Their gowns shimmering under iron chandeliers that had witnessed 3 centuries of Vryn's rule. Their practiced smiles cold as the stone walls surrounding them. Their eyes calculating the exact moment to bare their necks in submission. And he felt absolutely nothing. This grand solstice feast was supposed to be about honoring the moon goddess and strengthening pack alliances. But everyone knew the real reason the Northern Territories' elite showed up was to secure power, to forge advantageous bonds, to climb hierarchies built on ancient bloodlines and older violence, and for she-wolves like these to land an alpha like him. Rainer, 29, Alpha King of the Northern Territories and ruler of 7 packs that controlled everything from the mountain passes to half the trade routes in the region, stood 6 feet 4 inches in black leather armor that bore the silver wolf insignia of his house. His dark hair pulled back in a warrior's knot. A scar cutting through his jaw from a challenge he'd won at 17. Muscles earned through combat, not vanity. Eyes so dark they looked black in certain light, eyes that had seen too much death to ever look truly gentle. And a presence that made grown men step aside before he even spoke. 51 she-wolves had walked past him tonight, and his beta Mitchell kept count, kept nudging him, kept saying that one has good breeding. This one's father controls the eastern borders. And Rainer kept sipping wine and feeling like he was watching a puppet show where everyone knew their choreography except him. The nobles were beautiful, objectively stunning, the kind of women who graced pack tapestries and married alpha heirs and smiled like they'd been trained since birth to make powerful men stupid. But Rainer had grown up surrounded by beautiful things that wanted to control him. And he learned early that perfect faces often hid the ugliest ambitions. His father had taught him that right before his father had tried to broker him in a marriage alliance to unite rival packs. Right before Rainer had challenged for Alpha at 23 and told his father that some traditions deserved to be buried with the old ways. So he stood there, bored out of his mind, planning how quickly he could leave this farce, when the music shifted to something ancient and the crowd parted near the serving tables, and that's when he smelled her. Not perfume. Not the heavy oils the nobles wore. Just vanilla and rain and something wild underneath, something that made his wolf snap to attention for the first time in years. Rainer's head turned automatically, tracking the scent through the crowd. And he told himself it was predator instinct, the same awareness that had kept him alive in a world where wolves killed for showing weakness. Then he saw her. She wasn't a guest, wasn't wearing ceremonial silks, wasn't trying to catch anyone's attention at all, just a serving girl in the simple peasant dress the lower ranks wore, carrying a wine pitcher through the crowd with the kind of careful grace that came from survival, not performance. Her dark skin glowing warm under the flickering firelight. Her blonde locks pulled back with a leather tie. Her expression professionally neutral as she navigated between bodies and egos. Rainer's eyes locked on her with predatory focus, the way they tracked anything that moved differently from expected patterns. And he told himself it was tactical awareness. She delivered wine to a group of drunk nobles near the musicians. One said something crude. And instead of lowering her eyes like she should have, like protocol demanded, she turned to another servant beside her and smiled. And that smile hit Rainer like a blade between his ribs. It wasn't practiced, wasn't submissive, wasn't trying to seduce or manipulate or survive, just genuine warmth spreading across her face for 3 heartbeats before it disappeared back into careful neutrality. Real joy at sharing a moment with someone who understood what it meant to be invisible. And Rainer's wolf howled mate so loud he nearly dropped his goblet. He'd stopped breathing, wine frozen halfway to his lips. Every muscle in his body locked on that moment, on that smile, on the way it had transformed her entire face from beautiful to absolutely devastating. and on the scent of vanilla and rain that was now burning itself into his brain like a brand. Mitchell was saying something beside him, but Raynor couldn't hear it over the sudden roaring in his ears, over his wolf clawing to get out, over every instinct screaming to cross that hall and claim what was his. The serving girl turned, started walking back toward the kitchen entrance with her empty pitcher, and Raynor's feet moved before his mind caught up, cutting through the crowd with the kind of purposeful stride that made even drunk nobles stumble out of his path. But she disappeared through the servant's door before he could reach her. And he stood there in the middle of his own great hall like a fool, staring at weathered wood, his wolf snarling in frustration. "Did you just—" Mitchell appeared at his elbow, eyes wide with shock. "Did you just chase a servant across the room?" "I didn't chase anyone," Raynor growled. But his voice sounded wrong, even to himself, rough with barely contained need. "You walked past 51 noble she-wolves," Mitchell said slowly, carefully, like he was talking to someone dangerous. "Ignored every single one. And then stalked a kitchen girl like prey." Raynor couldn't explain it. Couldn't put into words what had just happened. How that smile had cracked something open in his chest that he'd thought was sealed shut after years of ruling through fear. How for 3 heartbeats he'd seen something pure in a room full of political games. How he suddenly needed to know her name more than he needed his next breath. How his wolf was certain, absolutely certain, that his mate was serving wine in his own damn castle. "Find out who she is," Raynor said quietly, and Mitchell knew that tone, the one that meant this wasn't a request, the one that made weaker wolves bare their throats. "The servant girl?" "Raynor, you can't be serious." "The council will." "Find her," Raynor interrupted, his eyes still fixed on that servant's door, on the space where she'd been. "Name, rank, everything. I want it by dawn." Mitchell stared at him like he'd lost his mind, but nodded and disappeared into the crowd, already moving to make it happen. Because when Raynor Vrins wanted something, reality bent to accommodate him. Raynor turned back to the feast, to the 51 noble she-wolves still circulating, still performing, still trying desperately to catch his attention, and felt nothing but cold impatience. Nothing but the need to hunt. To find the woman who'd smiled like sunshine and smelled like home, and had no idea she'd just become the most important person in his kingdom. He had no idea that woman was about to turn his carefully controlled world into chaos. But he was about to find out. Her name was Xiomara van der Vinny, and she had exactly 2 hours left in this nightmare before she could escape back to the servants' quarters, peel off this scratchy dress that made her itch, and collapse onto her shared cot in the cramped room she bunked in with 5 other Omega-rank she-wolves. The Grand Solstice Feast was supposed to be an honor, extra coin for serving the nobility, but Xiomara's feet disagreed violently with that assessment. And she was pretty sure one of the drunk alphas had just grabbed her wrist while she poured his wine, holding on too long, breathing too close. She'd smiled politely, twisted free without making a scene, and kept moving. Because Xiomara van der Vinny had 3 rules for surviving these upper-rank events: smile like you mean it, don't make eye contact longer than necessary, and never, ever give powerful wolves a reason to notice you. The Great Hall was packed with the Northern Territory's elite doing what they did best, which was pretending this was about the goddess, while really just networking and showing off their bloodlines. And Xiomara moved through them like a ghost, her pitcher balanced perfectly, her expression neutral, her mind already counting down the minutes until freedom. She had kitchen duty at dawn, then laundry rotation, then if she was lucky maybe an hour to visit her family in the lower districts before curfew, before she had to be back behind these stone walls that felt more like a prison than a home. "More wine, girl." A noble she-wolf in emeralds gestured imperiously, and Xiomara moved toward her with her professional smile firmly in place, poured, accepted no acknowledgement in return, and moved on. Because invisible was safest. And Xiomara had learned that lesson the hard way. She'd grown up in the slums of the lower districts, the daughter of a carpenter who'd lost his wolf in the northern wars, the sister to 3 brothers who worked themselves sick trying to keep their family fed. She'd been ranked Omega at her coming of age, the lowest designation possible, and told her best hope was service to a higher-ranked household. So at 24, Xiomara was still fighting to send money home, still working every feast and festival, still keeping her head down even when nobles treated her like furniture, still believing that maybe if she was good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, life might get a little easier. The orchestra started something haunting, and Xiomara caught sight of herself in one of the massive mirrors lining the walls, saw the exhaustion she was hiding behind her smile, and made herself stand straighter. Because giving up wasn't in her blood. And no matter how hard things got, she was still here. She delivered her wine to a group near the hearth and headed back toward the kitchens for a refill. And that's when she felt it, that prickling awareness of being hunted, the kind that made every survival instinct scream. Xiomara glanced over her shoulder and saw him. The Alpha King himself. Rainer Vrins. Standing in the middle of the crowd like a predator who'd forgotten he was supposed to be pretending to be civilized. His dark eyes locked on her with an intensity that stole her breath, his massive frame radiating barely contained violence, his expression absolutely feral. For just a heartbeat, their eyes met across the distance, and something electric crackled between them, something that made Xiomara's wolf whimper in confused submission and longing. Then she blinked, broke the connection, and shoved through the servant's door into the bright reality of the service corridor, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Girl, you okay?" her friend Locke asked, loading her own pitcher. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Just tired," Xiomara lied, but her hands were shaking. Because Alpha Kings didn't look at Omega servants like that. Didn't notice them at all unless they'd made some terrible mistake worthy of punishment. 20 more minutes and we can take a break, Locke said. "Keep smiling, we're almost free." Xiomara nodded, grabbed her refilled pitcher, and pushed back through the door into the great hall. And the Alpha King was gone, disappeared into the crowd, and she told herself the weird ache in her chest was relief, not disappointment. Because whatever that moment had been, it couldn't mean anything good for a girl like her. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of wine and forced smiles and aching feet. And by the time Xiomara finally made it back to the servants' quarters at midnight, she'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined the way the most dangerous wolf in the Northern Territories had looked at her. Almost. But when she fell asleep on her thin cot, she dreamed of dark eyes and the scent of leather and steel, and woke up more terrified than ever. What Xiomara didn't know was that in the tower above, in chambers overlooking the kingdom, Rainer was staring at a report Mitchell had delivered. Name, rank, family history, everything. And he was already planning how to bring his mate out of the shadows and into his world. Consequences be damned. The universe was about to collide their worlds, and neither of them was ready for what came next. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The kitchen air was thick with the smell of roasted meat and honeyed wine, a sharp contrast to the perfumed coldness of the great hall. Xiomara pushed through the servant's door and pressed her back against the stone wall, trying to catch her breath, trying to calm the panic clawing up her throat. He looked at you. The Alpha King looked at you. "Mara, you good?" Locke appeared beside her, concern creasing her round face. "You ran in here like wolves were chasing you." One was, Xiomara thought, but she couldn't say that out loud. Couldn't explain the way those dark eyes had pinned her in place, the way her wolf had responded with a confusing mix of terror and recognition. "I'm fine," Xiomara lied, straightening up and reaching for an empty pitcher. "Just needed a breath. The nobles are especially drunk tonight." Locke snorted. "When aren't they? I had one try to pull me into his lap earlier. Like we're part of the entertainment." She shook her head, her brown curls bouncing. 2 more hours, Mara. Then we're free until dawn shift. 2 more hours. Xiomara could survive 2 more hours. She'd survived worse. She was refilling her pitcher from the massive wine cask when the kitchen doors burst open with enough force to make every servant freeze. Rainer Vrins stood in the doorway. The Alpha King never came to the kitchens, never descended from his high table to the realm of servants and lower ranks. But there he was, filling the entrance with his massive frame, his black leather armor gleaming in the firelight, the silver wolf insignia on his chest seeming to glow. Every wolf in the kitchen immediately dropped to their knees, heads bowed in submission. Every wolf except Xiomara, who was too shocked to move, her pitcher tilting forgotten in her hands. Rainer's eyes scanned the room and locked onto her instantly, like he'd known exactly where she'd be. Like he could track her through stone walls and crowded halls and sheer force of will. He started walking toward her. "Kneel," Lob hissed from the floor, grabbing at Xiomara's dress. "Mara, kneel." The command finally broke through her shock. Xiomara dropped to her knees so hard it hurt, her head bowing, her heart trying to escape her chest. Wine from her tilted pitcher pooled on the stone floor around her knees. She could hear his footsteps. Heavy boots on stone. Getting closer. Closer. They stopped directly in front of her. Xiomara stared at those boots, expensive leather, battle-worn, splattered with what might have been old blood, and tried to remember how to breathe. "Look at me." His voice was rough, commanding, the kind of voice that made obeying feel like instinct rather than choice. Xiomara's wolf whimpered. "Because you didn't look an Alpha King in the eye. That was how Omegas got hurt. Got killed." But he'd given her a direct order, and disobeying was worse. Slowly, her hands trembling, Xiomara lifted her head. And met eyes so dark they were almost black, intense with something that looked like hunger and desperation and barely controlled violence all at once. "What's your name?" Rainer asked, and his voice was softer now, almost gentle, which was somehow more terrifying than the command had been. "Xiomara, Your Majesty," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Xiomara van der Vinny." "Xiomara," he repeated, and the way he said it made it sound like something precious. Like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "Why did you run from me?" I didn't." Xiomara's mind scrambled for the right answer, the safe answer. "I didn't mean to offend, Your Majesty. I was just returning to the kitchens for more wine. You didn't offend me," Rainer interrupted. Then he did something that made every servant in the kitchen gasp. He knelt. The Alpha King, ruler of 7 packs, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, dropped to one knee in front of an Omega serving girl, bringing himself down to her level. "I need to," he stopped, seeming to struggle with words. His jaw clenched. "I need you to stay still for a moment." Before Xiomara could ask why, before she could process what was happening, Rainer leaned forward and pressed his face against the curve of her neck, right where it met her shoulder, and inhaled deeply. Xiomara's entire body went rigid with shock. With fear. With something else she couldn't name. Because this was how wolves scented their mates. This was the claiming ritual. But that was impossible. Alpha Kings didn't mate with Omegas. Didn't mate with servants. Didn't kneel in dirty kitchens and breathe in the scent of nobodies like her. Rainer made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders. Not to hurt. Just to hold her there while he scented her like a man dying of thirst who'd finally found water. "Your Majesty," Xiomara breathed, terrified, confused. "I don't understand." "You're mine," Rainer said against her skin, his voice wrecked, reverent. "My mate. My Luna." The kitchen erupted in shocked whispers. Xiomara's vision started to blur at the edges. This couldn't be real. This had to be some elaborate, cruel joke. Alpha Kings didn't have Omega mates. The moon goddess didn't make those kinds of bonds. It violated every social law, every tradition, every... "Breathe," Rainer commanded gently, pulling back to look at her face. His hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Xiomara, breathe. You're safe. Safe." The Alpha King was touching her face, calling her his mate, and telling her she was safe. Nothing about this was safe. I need to take you out of here, Raynor said, his eyes scanning her face like he was memorizing every detail. I need to move you to the royal wing, where I can protect you. Where the council can't. The council? Xiomara's voice cracked. Because if the High Council learned the Alpha King had claimed an Omega as his mate, they would destroy her. They would destroy her entire family. Your Majesty, please, I can't. This isn't. Mitchell. Raynor barked, and his beta appeared in the doorway instantly, eyes wide at the scene before him. Clear the Royal East Chamber. I want guards posted. No one enters without my permission. Raynor, Mitchell said carefully, are you certain about this? The council will. The council can kneel or bleed, Raynor growled, his hands still cradling Xiomara's face. This is my mate. She will be treated as Luna. Anyone who challenges that answers to me. Xiomara's world was spinning. This was happening too fast. Too impossibly. She was going to wake up on her cot any moment and realize this was just a fever dream brought on by exhaustion. But Raynor's hands were warm and real against her skin. And the way he was looking at her, like she was the only thing in the entire kingdom that mattered, felt too devastating to be imaginary. Please, Xiomara whispered, tears burning her eyes, I'm nobody. I'm Omega rank. My family, they'll be killed for this. The council will. No one touches you, Raynor said with absolute certainty. No one touches your family. You're under my protection now. Do you understand? Xiomara didn't understand anything. But she nodded anyway, because what else could she do when an Alpha King declared you as mate in front of an entire kitchen of witnesses? Raynor stood, pulling her up with him, and Xiomara's legs nearly gave out. He caught her instantly, his arm around her waist, steadying her. Can you walk? He asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice. Yes, Xiomara managed. Good. Raynor turned to address the kitchen, his voice returning to that commanding alpha tone. What happened here tonight stays silent until I announce it formally. Anyone who speaks of this before then will answer to me personally. Understood. A chorus of, yes, Your Majesty, echoed through the kitchen. Raynor's arm tightened around Xiomara's waist, and he started walking her toward the door. Toward the Great Hall. Toward a future she couldn't begin to comprehend. Your Majesty, Xiomara tried one more time, her voice desperate. Please, I don't belong in your world. I don't know how to. You belong with me, Raynor said simply, and something in his voice made it sound like the truest thing he'd ever spoken. And I will teach you everything else. They stepped through the door, and Xiomara's life as an invisible servant ended forever. The Great Hall had gone silent. Not the natural quiet of conversation pausing, but the shocked, suffocating silence of an entire court watching their Alpha King walk through the crowd with his arm wrapped around a serving girl's waist. Xiomara wanted to die. Wanted the stone floor to open up and swallow her whole. Every eye in the hall was on her, noble she-wolves staring with barely concealed disgust, high-born males looking confused, drunk guests craning their necks to see what had caused the disruption. The 51 she-wolves who'd been competing for Raynor's attention all night stood frozen in their silk gowns, their perfect faces twisted with shock and rage. Raynor, a cold voice cut through the silence. What is the meaning of this? Xiomara's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew that voice. Elder Sylvian Burkoff stood from the High Council's table, his gray hair gleaming silver in the candlelight, his pale eyes sharp and calculating. He was ancient, powerful, and absolutely ruthless. The head of the council that advised, or more accurately, controlled much of Pack Law. Raynor didn't stop walking. Didn't even slow down. His arm tightened protectively around Xiomara as he guided her toward the main doors. I'm retiring for the evening, Elder Sylvian, Raynor said, his voice carrying across the hall with casual authority. The feast will continue without me. With a servant? Another council member stood, his voice dripping with disdain. You're leaving your own feast with kitchen staff? That's when Raynor stopped. Turned. And the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Choose your next words very carefully, Elder Matthias, Raynor said softly, and that softness was more terrifying than any shout. Because if you disrespect what's mine again, you won't have a tongue to speak with. Xiomara felt Raynor's whole body vibrate with barely restrained violence. Felt the power radiating off him in waves that made her wolf cower and submit. Elder Matthias's face went pale, but Sylvian stepped forward smoothly, his expression carefully neutral. "Forgive us, Your Majesty," Sylvian said, though his eyes were cold. "We're simply surprised. Surely you don't mean to suggest this girl is my mate," Raynor finished, and the words fell like stones into water, sending ripples of shock through the entire hall. "Xiomara Vandervinny is my fated mate, and she will be treated as Luna of this pack. Is that clear?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Nobles shouting in protest. The 51 she-wolves crying or screaming or fainting dramatically. Council members trying to speak over each other. The head priestess of the Moon Temple looking absolutely stunned. Through it all, Xiomara stood frozen in Raynor's arms, watching her life implode in real time. "This is impossible," one of the nobles shouted. "The Moon Goddess doesn't pair alphas with omegas. She's a servant," another voice cried. "She can't be Luna. The bloodline, the traditions. The council will never." "Enough." Raynor's voice cracked like thunder, amplified by his alpha command, and every wolf in the room immediately fell silent, many dropping to their knees involuntarily from the sheer force of his dominance. Xiomara's knees buckled, but Raynor's arm kept her upright, his hand splayed possessively across her waist. "I am your Alpha King," Raynor said, his voice deadly quiet now, more dangerous for its softness. "I bow to the Moon Goddess alone. Not to tradition. Not to bloodlines. And certainly not to a council that seems to have forgotten who rules these territories." Sylvian's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head carefully. "Of course, Your Majesty. But surely you understand this requires discussion. The implications." "Require nothing," Raynor interrupted. "The bond is fated. Divine. Are you suggesting I deny the will of the Moon Goddess herself?" It was a perfect trap, and Sylvian knew it. To deny a fated mate bond was heresy, but to accept an Omega as Luna would shatter centuries of tradition. "We would never suggest such blasphemy," Sylvian said smoothly. "We merely ask for time to prepare the pack for this unprecedented situation. Surely the girl needs training in Luna duties, proper education in pack law and protocol." "Which she will receive," Raynor said. "In the royal wing. Under my protection. Starting tonight." "Tonight?" Sylvian's mask slipped slightly. "Your Majesty, perhaps it would be more appropriate for her to remain in quarters suitable to her rank until—" "She's my mate," Raynor growled, and his eyes flashed with his wolf. "Her rank is Luna. And if you suggest separating a fated pair again, Elder Sylvian, I will take it as a challenge to my authority." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Sylvian's pale eyes flickered to Xiomara, and she saw something cold and calculating there that made her skin crawl. This wasn't over. This was barely beginning. "As you command, Your Majesty," Sylvian said, bowing his head. But his voice promised this conversation would continue. Raynor didn't wait for more protests. He turned and walked Xiomara straight through the crowd toward the main doors, nobles scrambling to get out of his path. Mitchell appeared at their side, his expression grim. "The East Chamber is ready. I've posted your most loyal guards." "Good," Raynor said. "No one enters without my direct permission. Not servants, not nobles, not council members." "You're going to have a war on your hands by morning," Mitchell muttered. "Let them try," Raynor said coldly. They passed through the massive oak doors into the torchlit corridor beyond, and the sounds of the feast, the arguing, the shock, the chaos, finally faded behind them. Xiomara's legs gave out. Raynor caught her instantly, sweeping her up into his arms like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. "I've got you," he said quietly, and there was that gentleness again, such a stark contrast to the deadly alpha he'd been moments before. "You're safe now." Safe. That word again. But Xiomara didn't feel safe. She felt like she'd just been thrown off a cliff and was waiting to hit the ground. "They're going to kill me," she whispered against his leather armor. "The council, they're going to." "No one kills what's mine," Raynor said, his voice hard as iron. "I would burn this entire kingdom to ash before I let anyone touch you." Xiomara looked up at him, at the brutal certainty in his face, and realized he meant it. Completely. This stranger who'd known her for less than an hour would go to war for her. It was the most terrifying thing she'd ever heard. "I don't understand," Xiomara said, tears finally spilling over. "Why me? I'm nobody. I'm Omega. You're everything," Raynor interrupted, looking down at her with those impossibly dark eyes. "You're my mate. My Luna. The other half of my soul. The moon goddess chose you for me, and I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of that gift." They climbed a spiral staircase Xiomara had only ever seen from a distance, the one that led to the royal wing, where servants weren't allowed unless summoned. "Your Majesty." "Raynor," he said. "When we're alone, call me Raynor." "Raynor," Xiomara tried, and the name felt strange on her tongue. "Too intimate. Too dangerous. My family. I need to tell them I'm safe. They'll worry when I don't come home tonight." Something flickered across Raynor's face. "Where does your family live?" "The lower districts," Xiomara said quietly. "The western slums. My father is a carpenter. I have 3 brothers. They'll think something terrible happened if I—" "Mitchell," Raynor called over his shoulder. "Send word to the Van der Vinny family in the western slums. Tell them Xiomara is safe and under royal protection. Post guards at their home. Discreetly." "On it," Mitchell said, already moving. Xiomara stared at Raynor in shock. "You're protecting them too?" "They're your family," Raynor said simply. "Which makes them pack to me. And I protect what's mine." They reached a door at the end of a long corridor, flanked by 2 massive guards who bowed immediately at Raynor's approach. "No one enters," Raynor commanded. "No one. I don't care if the castle is burning down. You guard this door with your lives." "Yes, Your Majesty," both guards said in unison. Raynor kicked the door open and carried Xiomara inside. The room was beautiful. Enormous. A 4-poster bed with silk curtains dominated one wall, a fireplace already crackling with warmth on another. Tapestries depicting wolf hunts and ancient battles hung from stone walls. Furs and soft rugs covered the floor. Windows overlooked the moonlit kingdom below. It was bigger than the entire room Xiomara shared with 5 other servants. Raynor set her carefully on the edge of the massive bed, then stepped back, putting distance between them. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice rough. "I will never force you. Never hurt you. The bond is faded, but I won't claim you until you want me to. Until you trust me. Do you understand?" Xiomara nodded slowly, not sure she believed him, but wanting to. "You're tired," Raynor continued. "Scared. Your whole world just changed in a single night. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sleep here tonight. Safe. Protected. Tomorrow we'll talk about everything else. The bond, the council, what comes next. But tonight, you just rest." "Where will you sleep?" Xiomara asked. Raynor gestured to a chair by the fire. "I'll be right here, guarding you." "You can't sleep in a chair," Xiomara protested weakly. "I've slept in worse," Raynor said, and that small smile again. "Besides, my wolf won't settle if I'm not close enough to protect you." He moved to the wardrobe and pulled out a soft sleeping tunic, clearly his, far too large for her. "You can change in the bathing chamber. There's a lock on the door. Take your time." Xiomara took the tunic with trembling hands and disappeared into the bathing chamber, a room with an actual copper tub, scented oils, soft towels, luxuries she'd only ever heard about. She changed quickly, her servant dress pooling on the floor, and caught sight of herself in the polished bronze mirror. The same Xiomara. Same dark skin, same blonde locks, same ordinary face. But wearing the Alpha King's tunic, standing in a royal chamber, claimed as his mate before the entire court. Nothing would ever be the same. When she emerged, Raynor was sitting by the fire, his armor removed, wearing just a simple black shirt and trousers. He looked more human like this. Less terrifying, though still impossibly dangerous. "The bed is yours," he said without turning around. "Sleep, Xiomara. I'll keep watch." Xiomara climbed into the bed, into silk sheets softer than anything she'd ever touched, and pulled the furs up to her chin. "Raynor," she said quietly into the darkness. "Yes. Why do you keep saying you'll protect me when you don't even know me?" Raynor was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because my wolf knew you were mine the moment you smiled. And for the first time in my life, something feels right. Feels real. I've killed for this crown, Xiomara. I've destroyed anyone who threatened my rule. But I would give it all up, the crown, the kingdom, everything, before I'd let anyone hurt you." Xiomara's breath caught. Because he meant it. She could hear it in his voice. "Sleep," Raynor said gently. "Tomorrow the war begins. But tonight you're safe." And despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the impossibility of it all, Xiomara's eyes drifted closed. In the chair by the fire, Raynor kept watch over his mate, his wolf finally quiet for the first time in years. And outside the door, in the shadows of the castle, Elder Sylvian began planning how to destroy a bond that should never have existed. Xiomara woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, wrapped in silk sheets that smelled like leather and pine and something wild. For 3 blissful seconds, she thought last night had been a dream. Then she saw him. Raynor stood by the window, fully dressed in black leather armor again, the silver wolf insignia catching the morning light. His dark hair was still damp from washing, pulled back in that warrior's knot. He was staring out at his kingdom with an expression that looked almost vulnerable, until he sensed she was awake and turned, and that vulnerability vanished behind the mask of the Alpha King. "You're awake," he said, and his voice was softer than it had any right to be. "I didn't want to disturb you. You were exhausted." Xiomara sat up slowly, painfully aware she was wearing only his oversized tunic, her locks messy from sleep. "How long have you been awake?" "I don't sleep much," Raynor admitted. "Old habits from war. But I had food brought up. You need to eat." He gestured to a table by the fire that hadn't been there last night, or maybe it had and she'd been too overwhelmed to notice. It was laden with more food than Xiomara usually saw in a week. Fresh bread, honey, dried fruits, cheese, roasted meat, hot tea. Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. Raynor's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Come, eat. We have a difficult day ahead." Xiomara wrapped one of the furs around herself and moved to the table, feeling exposed and uncertain. She sat carefully, not sure which utensil to use, which food she was allowed to touch. Raynor sat across from her, watching with those intense dark eyes. "I don't know the rules," Xiomara admitted quietly, staring at the feast before her. "I don't know how to be Luna. How to sit at your table. How to." "There are no rules when we're alone," Raynor interrupted. "Eat what you want. However you want. You're not a servant here, Xiomara. You're my equal." Equal. The word felt impossible in her mouth. But she was hungry, so she reached for bread and honey with trembling fingers, and it was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. She ate slowly at first, then faster when she realized Raynor wasn't judging her, wasn't stopping her. "Better?" he asked when she'd eaten her fill. Xiomara nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm teacup. "What happens now?" "Now I need to address several problems," Raynor said, his voice hardening. "The council requested an emergency meeting this morning. They're going to fight this bond with everything they have." "Then maybe you should," Xiomara started. "No." Raynor's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't even think it. I'm not giving you up to make their politics easier. But if it causes problems for your rule, let it." Raynor leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "I didn't become Alpha King by bowing to pressure. I took this crown because I was willing to do what others wouldn't. And I won't apologize for claiming my mate." Xiomara's wolf shivered at the possessive growl in his voice. But her human side was terrified. "They'll destroy me," she whispered. "The council. The nobles. They'll find a way to." "They'll try," Raynor agreed. "Which is why you're not leaving this wing without me or Mitchell. Which is why I've tripled the guards. Which is why," he stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "Which is why I need to prepare you for what comes next." "What comes next?" Raynor stood and moved to an ornate wardrobe, pulling it open to reveal gowns. Beautiful gowns in rich fabrics, deep burgundies, forest greens, midnight blues. Nothing like the simple peasant dresses Xiomara had worn her entire life. "The council wants to see you fail," Raynor said, running his hand over the fabrics. "They want proof you're not fit to be Luna. So they're going to test you. Publicly. Today." Xiomara's blood ran cold. "What kind of test?" "They've demanded you attend the morning assembly," Raynor said, his jaw tight with barely contained rage. "Where pack law is discussed and disputes are settled. Where every noble and council member will be watching, waiting for you to make a mistake." "I'll make dozens of mistakes," Xiomara said, panic rising in her throat. "I don't know pack law. I don't know protocol. I don't know how to." "Which is exactly why they scheduled it for this morning instead of giving you time to learn," Raynor growled. "They want you to fail in front of witnesses. Want to prove the bond is a mistake." "Maybe it is," Xiomara whispered. Raynor was across the room in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face, tilting her head up to meet his eyes. "Listen to me," he said fiercely. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. You are my mate. My Luna. And I don't care if you stumble over every word or forget every tradition. You could stand there silent the entire time, and I would still be proud to have you at my side." Tears burned Xiomara's eyes. "Why? Why does this matter so much to you when you barely know me?" "Because my wolf knows you," Raynor said softly. "Because you smiled at a fellow servant when you thought no one was watching. Because in a room full of people performing and pretending, you were real. Because," he stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Because I've been alone my entire life, Xiomara. Surrounded by people, but utterly alone. And then I saw you, and for the first time, I wasn't." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Before Xiomara could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. "Your Majesty," Mitchell's voice came through. "The council is assembled." "They're getting impatient." Raynor's jaw clenched, but he stepped back from Xiomara. "Get dressed. Choose whichever gown you like. I'll wait outside." "I don't know how to wear these," Xiomara admitted, looking at the elaborate gowns with growing dread. "They have so many laces and—" "I'll send someone to help," Raynor said. Then, more quietly, "Someone you can trust." 20 minutes later, Xiomara stood in a gown of deep emerald green that made her skin glow, her locks arranged elegantly by a kind older woman named Hilda who'd whispered encouragement the entire time. "You look like a queen already," Hilda had said, fastening the last clasp. "Don't let them see your fear, child. Wolves can smell it." Now Xiomara stood before the mirror, barely recognizing herself. The gown fit perfectly, the fabric expensive and beautiful. But it felt like a costume. Like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Raynor knocked once, then entered. And stopped dead. "Xiomara," he breathed, and the way he looked at her, like she'd stolen the air from his lungs, made her blush. "Is it wrong?" Xiomara asked anxiously, turning. "Should I choose something else?" "I don't know what." "You're perfect," Raynor said, and there was something almost reverent in his voice. "You're absolutely perfect." He crossed to her and offered his arm. "Ready?" "No," Xiomara admitted. "Good," Raynor said, and that fierce smile. "Neither are they." The walk to the council chambers felt like a death march. Servants pressed themselves against walls as they passed, staring openly. Nobles whispered behind their hands. Guards watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. Xiomara kept her chin up, kept her hand steady on Raynor's arm, and tried to remember Hilda's words. "Don't let them smell your fear." The council chamber doors loomed ahead, massive oak carved with wolves and ancient symbols. Mitchell stood outside, his expression grim. "They're all here," he said quietly. "All 7 council members. Plus about 30 nobles who demanded to witness. It's going to be brutal." "Let it be," Raynor said coldly. "They'll learn today what it costs to challenge what's mine." The doors swung open, and Xiomara's courage nearly failed her. The chamber was circular, with the council seated on a raised platform at the far end. Below them, nobles packed the space, all eyes turning to watch as Raynor entered with Xiomara on his arm. The whispers started immediately. Wearing royal colors. Actually presenting her as Luna. Insulting. Omega filth. Raynor's hand covered hers on his arm, squeezing once in reassurance, and they walked down the center aisle toward the council. Elder Sylvian Burkhoff sat in the center seat, his pale eyes cold and calculating as they tracked Xiomara's approach. The other 6 council members flanked him, their expressions ranging from disapproval to outright hostility. "Your Majesty," Sylvian said, standing and inclining his head. "And, Miss van der Vinne, how kind of you to join us." The dismissal in calling her Miss instead of Luna was deliberate and cutting. Raynor's eyes flashed dangerous. "Elder Sylvian, you demanded this meeting. State your purpose." "Of course," Sylvian said smoothly. "We simply wish to ensure that your companion understands what being Luna entails. Surely you agree she should demonstrate competency before being formally presented to the pack." It was a trap. Xiomara could feel it. "My mate doesn't need to prove anything," Raynor growled. "Then you don't object to a simple conversation?" Elder Matthias spoke up, his voice dripping with false concern. "Merely to educate the girl on her new responsibilities?" "I object to you calling my Luna the girl," Raynor said dangerously. "My apologies," Matthias said, not sounding sorry at all. He turned to Xiomara, his smile sharp. "Tell us, Xiomara, what do you know of Luna duties?" Xiomara's mouth went dry. Every eye in the chamber was on her. She started, then stopped. "I know the Luna serves as the Alpha's partner. Supports the pack. Represents." "How?" Sylvian interrupted. "Specifically, what are the Luna's responsibilities during challenge rituals?" Xiomara had no idea. She'd never attended a challenge ritual. Omegas weren't allowed. What about bloodline disputes?" Another council member pressed. "How does the Luna mediate those? Or feast day protocols?" Matthias added. "Surely you know the proper blessing for the spring hunt?" They were firing questions at her like arrows, each one highlighting her ignorance, her unsuitability. The nobles were watching with satisfaction, seeing exactly what they'd hoped to see, an Omega girl drowning in responsibilities she couldn't possibly fulfill. Xiomara's vision blurred with shame. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know any of that." "How unfortunate," Sylvian said, his voice cutting through the satisfied murmurs of the crowd. "These are basic Luna responsibilities. Things every proper she-wolf of rank learns from childhood." "She'll learn," Raynor said, his voice deadly quiet. "But should the pack suffer while she does?" Sylvian countered. "Your Majesty, we don't question the bond. The moon goddess's will is sacred. But perhaps Miss van der Vinne would be more comfortable with a quieter role? A private mate rather than a public Luna? At least until she's properly educated." There it was. The trap sprung. They were trying to separate her from Raynor's power, turn her into a hidden shame rather than an acknowledged partner. "No," Raynor said flatly. "Your Majesty." "I said no." Raynor's alpha command filled the room, making wolves press back in their seats. "Xiomara is my mate and my Luna. She will learn what she needs to learn. And if anyone in this chamber believes that breeding and bloodline matter more than the moon goddess's chosen bond, they're welcome to challenge me for the crown." Silence fell like a blade. Because challenge rituals were fights to the death. And no one in that room could beat Raynor. "We would never," Sylvian started. "Then show my Luna the respect she deserves," Raynor interrupted coldly. "Or get the fuck out of my territory." The nobles gasped at the profanity. Council members looked genuinely shocked. And Xiomara, Standing there in her borrowed gown, feeling small and inadequate and utterly out of place, made a decision. She stepped forward, away from Raynor's protective arm, and faced the council directly. "You're right," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I don't know Luna protocols. I don't know bloodline law or feast day blessings or challenge rituals. I was raised Omega. I wasn't taught these things." Sylvian smiled, thinking he'd won. "But I know service," Xiomara continued, and her voice grew stronger. "I know what it means to work until your hands bleed. I know what it means to go hungry so your family can eat. I know what it's like in the lower districts, in the slums, where most of this pack actually lives. Where your laws and your protocols don't mean anything because people are just trying to survive." The nobles shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe that's not the Luna you wanted," Xiomara said, meeting Sylvian's cold eyes. "Maybe you wanted someone who knows which fork to use at fancy dinners. But the moon goddess gave you me. And if I'm going to be Luna, I'm going to fight for the wolves no one else sees. The ones doing the serving. The ones breaking their backs while you debate protocol." Raynor was staring at her with something that looked like awe. "You want me to prove I'm worthy?" Xiomara finished, her heart hammering. "Fine. But I won't prove it by reciting laws I never had the privilege to learn. I'll prove it by actually helping the pack. All of it. Not just the nobles in this room." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some nobles shouting in outrage, others looking thoughtful, the council members arguing among themselves. But Raynor was smiling. Actually smiling, fierce and proud. He stepped forward and took Xiomara's hand, threading their fingers together. "My Luna has spoken," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The council is dismissed. We're done here. Your Majesty, we haven't." "I said we're done." Raynor turned, pulling Xiomara with him toward the door. "Anyone who has a problem with my mate can bring it directly to me. Preferably with a weapon, because you'll fucking need one." They walked out together, leaving chaos in their wake. In the corridor, Mitchell was grinning. "That was incredible." Xiomara's knees buckled as the adrenaline faded, but Raynor caught her, pulling her against his chest. "You were magnificent," he said into her hair. "Absolutely magnificent." "I probably made everything worse," Xiomara whispered. "You made it better," Raynor corrected. "You showed them exactly why the moon goddess chose you." But as they walked back toward the royal wing, Xiomara couldn't shake the memory of Sylvian's expression. Not angry. Not even surprised. Calculating. Like she'd just played directly into some larger plan. And in his chambers, Sylvian smiled coldly and began writing a letter to Xiomara's family. The war had just begun. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Raynor kept Xiomara close, teaching her bits of protocol between council meetings he refused to let her attend alone. Hilda brought meals and kind words. Mitchell updated them on pack gossip, most of it vicious, some of it cautiously hopeful. And at night, Raynor still slept in the chair by the fire, keeping watch while Xiomara took the massive bed. The bond hummed between them, growing stronger with each passing hour. Xiomara felt it when Raynor entered a room, a pull low in her belly, a need to be close to him. And she caught him watching her sometimes with such raw hunger it made her breath catch. But he never pushed, never demanded, just kept his distance like he'd promised, even though it was clearly killing him. On the 4th morning, Xiomara woke to find him gone and a note on the table. Council session. Back by noon. Mitchell is outside if you need anything. R. Xiomara dressed in one of the simpler gowns, a soft gray that didn't make her feel like she was playing dress up, and was braiding her locks when someone knocked. "Miss Vandervinny?" A young guard's voice came through. "You have a visitor. Your brother, Don. He says it's urgent." Xiomara's heart leaped. Don. Her youngest brother, barely 17, sweet and protective and probably terrified about what had happened to her. She yanked open the door. "Where is he?" "The visiting chamber, miss." "I can escort you." "Please," Xiomara said, already moving. Mitchell appeared from down the hall. Xiomara, wait. Raynor said you shouldn't leave the royal wing without. It's my brother, Xiomara said desperately. Please, Mitchell. I need to see him. Just for a few minutes. I need to tell him I'm okay. Mitchell hesitated, warring with his duty. Finally he sighed. Fine. But I'm coming with you. And we're taking guards. The visiting chamber was small and sparsely furnished, a room where servants met family during their rare free hours. Xiomara had been there dozens of times before. Don stood by the window, his back to the door. He was tall for 17, gangly, with the same dark skin and worried expression Xiomara remembered. Don. Xiomara rushed forward. He turned, and something was wrong. His eyes were red from crying. His hands were shaking. Mara, he choked out. Mara, I'm so sorry. They made me, I had to. The door slammed shut behind her. Xiomara spun to find Mitchell being held back by guards she didn't recognize, wearing council insignias instead of Raynor's colors. And Elder Sylvian Burkoff stepped out from behind a tapestry, flanked by 2 more guards. Miss van der Vinny, Sylvian said pleasantly. How kind of you to join us. Xiomara's blood turned to ice. She looked at Don, at his tear-stained face, and understood. What did you do to him? Nothing permanent, Sylvian assured her. Yet? But your family's safety depends entirely on your cooperation in the next few minutes. You bastard, Mitchell snarled, struggling against the guards holding him. Beta Mitchell, please, Sylvian said mildly. This doesn't concern you. Though I'm afraid you'll need to remain here until we're finished. Can't have you running to your alpha prematurely. Raynor will kill you for this, Xiomara said, her voice shaking with rage and terror. Perhaps, Sylvian agreed. If he finds out. But that depends on you, my dear. He moved closer, his pale eyes cold. You gave quite the performance in the council chamber. Very touching. Very earnest. What do you want? Xiomara demanded. I want you to leave, Sylvian said simply. Today. Now. Disappear into the human lands where the bond can't track you. Never contact the Alpha King again. No, Xiomara said immediately. Sylvian sighed like he'd expected that. He gestured to one of his guards, who produced a folder thick with papers. Your father, Hendrik van der Vinny, Sylvian read aloud. Works as a carpenter in the western slums. Lost his wolf in the northern wars. Currently owes 3 months back rent on the family dwelling. He looked up. Did you know the landlord is preparing eviction papers? Xiomara's stomach dropped. Your eldest brother, Peter, works the docks. I understand his supervisor is considering letting him go due to declining performance. Sylvian's smile was cruel. Or perhaps due to the fact that his sister has brought shame upon the family by seducing an alpha king above her station. I didn't seduce anyone, Xiomara said through clenched teeth. The bond is faded. Is it? Sylvian moved closer, circling her like a predator. Or did a clever little Omega see an opportunity and manufacture a situation? You wouldn't be the first servant to try such tricks. The moon goddess. The moon goddess works in mysterious ways, Sylvian interrupted. Ways that are sometimes mistaken for genuine bonds when they're merely powerful infatuation. Bonds can be broken, Miss van der Vinny. Especially new ones. Especially when one party removes themselves completely. Xiomara looked at Dawn, who was crying silently. What did you threaten them with? Nothing dramatic, Sylvian said. Just the truth. That if you remain as Luna, your entire family will become targets. Every rival of the Alpha King will see them as leverage. Every noble who opposes this match will see them as obstacles to remove. They'll never be safe again. He paused. Unless you leave. And if I do leave? Xiomara asked, her voice hollow. Then I personally guarantee your family's protection, Sylvian said. Your father keeps his home. Your brothers keep their jobs. Your little cousin in the Eastern District keeps her apprenticeship. All the van der Vinnies stay safe and whole. His eyes glittered. But only if you go. Today. And you don't look back. Xiomara, don't, Mitchell growled. Raynor will handle this. He'll protect them. Don't let this bastard manipulate. One of the guards hit Mitchell hard enough to split his lip. Beta Mitchell, please, Sylvian said. Let the girl think. Xiomara's mind was racing. If she stayed, her family became targets. Every enemy Raynor had would use them against him. And there would be enemies, the nobles who hated the match, the council members who wanted traditional bloodlines, rival packs who saw weakness. But if she left, she thought of Raynor's face when he looked at her. The way he'd knelt in a kitchen to send her. The way he'd faced down the entire council to defend her. The way his wolf had finally found peace. How do I know you'll keep your word? Xiomara asked quietly. Sylvian smiled, sensing victory. Because I am a wolf of honor, Miss van der Vinnie. My word is my bond. Your family will be protected. You have my oath before the moon goddess. It was a trap. Xiomara knew it was a trap. But she also knew her family would die if she stayed. Slowly, painfully, caught in political games they didn't understand. I need to leave him a message, Xiomara said, her voice breaking. I need to explain. No messages, Sylvian said firmly. A clean break is kindest. He'll grieve, but he'll move on. Find a proper Luna. Rule as he was meant to. He'll come after me, Xiomara said. He'll track me. Not if you reject the bond, Sylvian said. Publicly. Here. Now. Declare before witnesses that you feel no bond, that you used him for status, that you want nothing more to do with him. The rejection will sever the connection enough that he won't be able to track you easily. Xiomara felt like she was being torn in half. I can't do that to him. Then your family suffers, Sylvian said coldly. Choose, Miss van der Vinnie. Your happiness or their lives. It's really quite simple. Dawn was sobbing openly now. Mara, please. They said they'd hurt Papa. Said they'd make sure none of us could find work. I'm so sorry, but please. Xiomara closed her eyes. Saw her father's weathered face. Her brother's worried expressions. All the people who'd sacrificed everything to keep her fed and safe when she was growing up. And she thought of Raynor, alone again. Betrayed by the one person his wolf had chosen. If I do this, Xiomara said, her voice hollow, you swear on the moon goddess that my family stays safe. All of them. Forever. You have my sacred oath, Sylvian said. It was a lie. Xiomara knew it was a lie. But she also knew she had no choice. I reject, she started, then stopped. Can I at least wait until he gets back? Let me say goodbye. No, Sylvian said. It must be now. Before the Alpha King returns and complicates things with his feelings. You're a monster, Mitchell spat. I'm a realist, Sylvian corrected. This match is an abomination. The Alpha King deserves better than Omega trash, and the pack deserves a Luna of proper breeding. I'm simply correcting an error before it destroys everything. Xiomara opened her mouth, the words of rejection forming on her tongue. The door exploded inward. Raynor stood in the doorway, and Xiomara had never seen him look so terrifying. His eyes were completely black, his wolf fully present, violence radiating off him in waves that made even Sylvian's guards step back. Mitchell wasn't at his post, Raynor said, his voice inhuman, layered with his wolf's growl. So I came looking. And I find this. His eyes landed on Sylvian, and the elder actually paled. Your Majesty, Sylvian started. This isn't what it. You're threatening my mate, Raynor snarled, stalking forward. In my own castle. You brought her brother here to manipulate her. You dared to lay hands on my beta. Each word was punctuated by another step forward. Give me one reason not to rip your throat out right now. The council will never accept her. Sylvian burst out, his composure cracking. You're destroying centuries of tradition for a servant. The pack will fracture. Civil war will. Then let it burn, Raynor said coldly. I'll build a new pack from the ashes. One that doesn't need elders who threaten innocent families to maintain their power. He reached Sylvian and grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off his feet. The elders' guards started forward, but Mitchell was suddenly free and blocking them, his own wolf surfacing. Raynor, Xiomara said quietly. Don't. Raynor's head snapped toward her, his eyes still black. He threatened you. He threatened your family. He deserves death. Probably, Xiomara agreed, moving closer. But killing him makes you the villain. Makes me the Omega who started a war. Proves everyone right who says I'm not fit to be Luna. I don't care what they say, Raynor growled. I do, Xiomara said, and she laid her hand on his arm, the first time she'd touched him of her own volition. Please. Let him go. Raynor's jaw clenched. His hand tightened on Sylvian's throat until the elder's face turned purple. For a moment, Xiomara thought he'd kill him anyway. Then he dropped Sylvian to the floor in a heap. You have until sunset to leave my territory, Raynor said, his voice deadly quiet. If you're still here after that, I'll mount your head on the castle gates. Sylvian gasped for air, clutching his throat. The council. We'll have a new head by morning, Raynor finished. Someone who understands that threatening my mate means death. Now get out before I change my mind about letting you live. Sylvian scrambled to his feet and fled, his guards following. Raynor turned to Dawn, who was pressed against the wall, terrified. You. Tell me everything he said to you. Everything he threatened. Dawn, shaking, explained about the men who'd come to their home, the threats against their father, the ultimatum that Xiomara had to leave or the family would suffer. With each word, Raynor's expression grew darker. When Dawn finished, Raynor was silent for a long moment. Then, Mitchell, take Dawn to the kitchens. Get him fed. Then arrange transport for the entire Van der Vinny family. Transport where? Mitchell asked. Here, Raynor said. To the castle. All of them. They're moving into the East Wing today. Under permanent guard. No one threatens them again. Your Majesty, you don't have to, Dawn started. Your sister is my mate, Raynor interrupted, his voice gentling slightly. Which makes you pack. My pack. And I protect what's mine. Mitchell let a stun Dawn out, leaving Raynor and Xiomara alone. Raynor moved to her immediately, his hands cupping her face, his eyes searching. Did he hurt you? No, Xiomara whispered. But I was going to reject you. To save them. I was actually going to. Her voice broke, and suddenly she was sobbing. Great, heaving sobs that she'd been holding back for days. All the fear, all the pressure, all the impossibility of this situation crashing down at once. Raynor pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her, one hand cradling her head while she cried into his leather armor. You're safe, he murmured. They're safe. I've got you. I've got all of you. I don't know how to do this, Xiomara sobbed. I don't know how to be what you need. What they need. I'm nobody, and you're everything, Raynor said fiercely, pulling back to look at her. You were willing to break your own heart to save your family. You stood up to the council when you had every reason to be terrified. You're brave and strong and real, and that's all I need. That's all I've ever needed. But the bond, Xiomara said, wiping her eyes. I don't understand it. I feel it pulling at me, and I don't know what to do with that. Don't know if it's real or just. It's real, Raynor said softly. I feel it too. Every moment. Every breath. My wolf knows you're mine. But Xiomara, I need you to understand something. He took her hands, threading their fingers together. The fated bond is real, he continued. But what we build on top of that, that's our choice. I won't claim you just because the moon goddess said we're mates. I want you to want me. Want this. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. Xiomara looked up at him, at this powerful, dangerous alpha king who kept showing her gentleness when she expected cruelty. I don't know if I want it yet, she admitted quietly. I'm still scared. Still confused. Still feel like this is all happening too fast. Then we slow down, Raynor said simply. We take time. Let the bond settle. Let you learn to trust me. I can wait, Xiomara. My wolf has waited 29 years for you. We can wait longer if that's what you need. Something in Xiomara's chest cracked open at that. At his willingness to wait. to let her find her own way. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Tonight, Xiomara said, her cheeks heating. Will you sleep in the bed instead of the chair? Not for claiming or anything. Just close. I think I'd feel safer if you were close. Rainer's eyes darkened, but he nodded. If that's what you want. It is, Xiomara said, and realized she meant it. That night, Rainer climbed into the massive bed fully clothed, staying carefully on his side. Xiomara lay on hers, the silk sheets between them, and for the first time since this all began, she felt like she could breathe. Rainer, she said into the darkness. Yes, thank you. For my family. For not killing Sylvian even though you wanted to. For being patient with me. Always, Rainer said quietly. For you, always. Xiomara's hand crept across the sheets and found his. Their fingers intertwined, and the bond hummed with contentment. She fell asleep like that, holding the hand of the Alpha King, and for the first time, didn't have nightmares. In his chambers in the guest wing, packing to leave before sunset, Sylvian stared at a message he'd just received and smiled coldly. He'd lost this battle, but the war was far from over, and he'd just found the perfect weapon. Xiomara woke wrapped in warmth, her face pressed against leather and steel and the scent of pine. For a confused moment, she didn't understand where she was. Then she realized she'd migrated across the bed in her sleep, and Rainer had pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her, his chin resting on top of her head. She should have felt trapped. Should have panicked. Instead, she felt safe. Rainer's breathing was deep and even actually asleep for once, his face softer without the constant tension he carried. The scar on his jaw was more visible like this, and Xiomara wondered about the fight that had given it to him. She started to pull away carefully, not wanting to wake him, but his arms tightened instinctively. Stay, he murmured, still half asleep. Please. So Xiomara stayed, her heart hammering, until Rainer fully woke and realized how tightly he was holding her. He released her immediately, sitting up and running a hand through his loose hair. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I didn't mean to. My wolf doesn't understand boundaries when you're close. It's okay, Xiomara said, and was surprised to find she meant it. I didn't mind. Something heated flashed in Rainer's eyes before he controlled it. Still, I should have. A sharp knock interrupted him. Your Majesty, Mitchell's voice came through, urgent. We have a problem. Rainer was off the bed and at the door in seconds, pulling it open. What happened? Mitchell's face was grim. Sylvian left at sunset yesterday like you ordered. But this morning, 3 other council members submitted formal resignations. They're claiming they can't serve under an alpha who disrespects tradition and threatens elders. Let them resign, Rainer said coldly. That's not the problem, Mitchell continued. The problem is they're calling for an emergency council session, invoking the ancient rites. Rainer went very still. They wouldn't dare. What's the ancient rites? Xiomara asked, wrapping a fur around herself and moving closer. It's an old law, Rainer said, his jaw tight. If 4 or more council members resign in protest of an alpha's decision, they can demand a formal pack vote on whether the alpha should remain in power. Xiomara's blood ran cold. They're trying to remove you? They're trying to force my hand, Rainer corrected. If I let the vote happen and lose, I forfeit the crown. If I refuse the vote, I'm technically breaking ancient law, which gives them grounds to declare me a tyrant and rally support for a challenge. That's insane, Xiomara said. You're the Alpha King. You earned that crown. They can't just. They can if they have enough support, Mitchell interrupted. And right now, they're calling in every favor, every alliance. The nobles who wanted their daughters to be Luna are backing them. The traditionalists who hate the idea of an Omega Luna are backing them. It's bad, Rainer. Rainer turned to look out the window at his kingdom, his hands fisted at his sides. How long do I have? The vote is in 3 days, Mitchell said. At the Blood Moon ceremony. Every pack member of rank will be there. It'll be public, witnessed, binding. Then we have 3 days to change their minds, Raynor said. Or, Mitchell said carefully, you could consider what they're really asking for. Which is, they're not actually trying to remove you, Mitchell said. They know they can't. You're too strong, too popular with the military and the working class. What they want is for you to cave. To set Xiomara aside. To choose a proper Luna. If you do that, they'll withdraw the vote, claim victory, and everything goes back to normal. Xiomara felt like she'd been punched. You mean if I leave, this all stops? No, Raynor said immediately, turning to face her. Don't even think it. But if I'm the problem. You're not the problem, Raynor snarled. They are. And I won't bow to political pressure. Won't trade you like a bargaining chip to keep power I took with my own hands. Even if it costs you the crown? Xiomara asked quietly. Even then, Raynor said without hesitation. The crown means nothing without you. The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Mitchell cleared his throat. There might be another option. If Xiomara could prove herself before the vote. Show the pack that she's capable. That she deserves to be Luna. How? Xiomara asked. I don't know anything about being Luna. 3 days isn't enough time to. The Widow's Walk, Mitchell said. It's a tradition. When a new Luna is contested, she can choose to walk among the lower districts without guards, without status, and help those in need. If she survives and earns the people's respect, it's considered proof of the moon goddess's blessing. Survives? Xiomara repeated. What do you mean survives? The lower districts can be dangerous, Mitchell admitted. Especially for someone the nobles have marked as an enemy. But if you could do it, if you could show the pack that you understand their struggles, that you actually care about more than politics. It could work, Raynor said slowly, though his expression was pained. The common wolves would see you helping them. See you as one of them who rose up. It might be enough to sway the vote. Or she could be killed, Mitchell said bluntly. Let's not pretend this is safe. The nobles who want her gone will send people after her. Test her. Try to make her fail, or worse. Then I'll go with her, Raynor said immediately. You can't, Mitchell said. That's the whole point. She has to do it alone. Has to prove she can lead without hiding behind your power. Xiomara looked between them, her mind racing. 3 days. Alone in the lower districts she'd grown up in, but hadn't visited since joining the castle staff. Helping people who probably hated her now for rising above her station. What if I fail? She asked quietly. What if I do this, and it's not enough? Then we fight, Raynor said simply. We stand together and face whatever comes. But Xiomara, I won't force you to do this. The Widow's Walk is brutal. Dangerous. If you don't want. I'll do it, Xiomara interrupted. Raynor's eyes widened. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Xiomara said, straightening her shoulders. You faced down the council for me. Threatened an elder. Moved my entire family to protect them. The least I can do is walk among my own people and prove I haven't forgotten where I came from. Your people, Raynor repeated softly, and something like pride flickered across his face. That's exactly why you'll make a perfect Luna. When do I start? Xiomara asked Mitchell. Now, Mitchell said. Today. The faster you complete it, the more impressive it looks. You have until the blood moon ceremony in 3 days. That's when the vote happens. What exactly do I have to do? Xiomara asked. Help those in need, Mitchell explained. Feed the hungry. Tend the sick. Settle disputes. Show that you can lead with compassion and strength. The people you help will speak for you at the ceremony. Their testimony could sway the vote. And if people try to hurt her? Raynor asked, his voice dangerous. Then she defends herself, Mitchell said. That's part of the test too. A Luna needs to be strong enough to protect herself and the pack. Raynor looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to wrap Xiomara up and hide her away where nothing could touch her. Instead, he turned to her. Are you sure about this? No, Xiomara admitted. I'm terrified. But I'm sure about us. About wanting to try. And that means proving I'm worth the trouble you're going through for me. You're worth everything, Raynor said fiercely. Then, more quietly, I'll have Mitchell shadow you. Far enough back that it doesn't break the rules, but close enough that if you're in real danger. I won't let her die, Mitchell promised. Raynor moved to Xiomara, his hands cupping her face like he'd done so many times before. 3 days. Then you come back to me. Safe. Do you understand? 3 days, Xiomara agreed. And Xiomara? Raynor's thumbs brushed her cheekbones. When you come back, if you still want this bond, if you still want us, I'm going to properly court you. Do this right. Not just rely on fate, but actually win your heart. Xiomara's breath caught. And if the vote doesn't go our way, then we run, Raynor said simply. Leave this kingdom behind and build a new life somewhere they can't find us. I meant what I said, the crown means nothing without you. You'd give up everything? Xiomara whispered. For you. Raynor leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes closing. In a heartbeat. An hour later, Xiomara stood at the castle gates dressed in simple peasant clothes, her old servant dress. Actually, the one she'd worn the night everything changed. Her locks were tied back practically. No jewelry. No status markers. Just Xiomara van der Vinny, Omega, about to walk into the lower districts and prove she deserved to be Luna. Raynor stood beside her, clearly struggling not to pull her back inside where it was safe. If anyone threatens you, he said for the 10th time, you run. You scream. Mitchell will be listening. I'll be fine, Xiomara interrupted, standing on her toes to kiss his cheek, the first kiss she'd initiated. 3 days. I'll be back. Then she walked through the gates before she could lose her nerve. The lower districts hadn't changed. The same narrow streets. The same smell of cooking fires and unwashed bodies and desperation. The same children playing in the mud while their parents worked themselves to exhaustion. But everything felt different now. Because now Xiomara wasn't just surviving here, she was trying to help. Her first stop was the baker's district, where she knew families struggled to afford bread. She used the small purse of coins Mitchell had given her from your own Luna allowance. He'd insisted to buy every loaf the baker had, then distributed them to families she remembered from her childhood. At first, they looked at her with suspicion. With anger. You're the one who seduced the Alpha King, one woman spat. Rising above your station, making the rest of us look bad. I didn't seduce anyone, Xiomara said quietly. The bond is faded. But you're right that I've been given opportunities you haven't. So let me share them. Take the bread. Feed your family. And if you have problems, disputes with landlords, issues with work, anything, tell me. I'll try to help. Slowly, grudgingly, they took the bread. And a few told her their problems. A carpenter whose tools had been stolen. A mother whose child was sick but couldn't afford medicine. A man whose wages had been withheld by a corrupt overseer. Xiomara listened to each one, making notes in a small journal Mitchell had given her. And she promised to help. The carpenter, Xiomara tracked down the thief, a desperate father who'd stolen to feed his own family. Instead of punishment, she arranged for both men to share tool costs and work together. The sick child, Xiomara went to the castle healer herself, begging for medicine. The healer, an old woman named Griot, took one look at Xiomara's determined face and smiled. You'll do, she said, giving her enough medicine for 20 children. A real Luna thinks of the pack before herself. The withheld wages, Xiomara confronted the overseer publicly, threatening to bring the matter to the Alpha King himself. The overseer, terrified of Raynor's wrath, paid immediately. Word spread fast. The Omega girl who'd become Luna was walking the districts. Helping people. Actually caring. Some still hated her. Threw rotten food. Cursed her for thinking she was better than them now. But others started seeking her out. Bringing their problems. Testing whether she'd really help or if this was just performance. Xiomara helped them all. By the end of the first day, she was exhausted, filthy, and her feet were screaming. But she'd helped 30 families. Settled 6 disputes. Even delivered a baby when the local midwife was too drunk. Mitchell appeared at sunset, materializing from the shadows. You need to rest. Eat. Recover. I need to keep going, Xiomara said, wiping sweat from her forehead. 3 days isn't much time. And you'll collapse if you don't pace yourself, Mitchell argued. Come on. There's a safe house nearby. You can sleep a few hours. The safe house was tiny, barely more than a closet with a cot. But it was clean and secure, and Xiomara collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. She dreamed of Rainer. Of his dark eyes and gentle hands. Of the way he'd promised to court her properly. Of the life they might have if she could just survive 3 more days. She woke to screaming. Xiomara bolted upright, her heart pounding. The screaming was coming from outside, a woman's voice, high and terrified. Mitchell was already at the door, his hand on his weapon. Stay here. I'll check. But Xiomara was already pushing past him, running toward the sound. She found a woman in the street, her dress torn, blood streaming from her nose. 2 men stood over her, drunk and laughing. Please, the woman sobbed. I don't have any money. Please just. One of the men kicked her. Xiomara saw red. She didn't think. Just moved. Grabbed a piece of wood from a nearby pile and swung it at the first man's head. He went down hard. The second man spun, saw Xiomara, and grinned. Well, well. The pretend Luna. Been waiting to meet you. He lunged. Xiomara barely dodged, swinging her makeshift weapon again. It connected with his arm, making him curse, but he was bigger and stronger and trained. He grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the wall. You don't belong here, he growled, his breath reeking of alcohol and malice. Don't belong with the Alpha King. Time someone taught you your place. Xiomara couldn't breathe. Black spots danced across her vision. Then Mitchell was there, ripping the man off her and throwing him into the mud. Touch her again, Mitchell snarled, his wolf surfacing, his eyes glowing, and I'll rip your spine out through your throat. Both men scrambled to their feet and ran. Xiomara slumped against the wall, gasping for air. The woman she defended was staring at her with wide eyes. You saved me, the woman whispered. You actually saved me. Are you okay? Xiomara managed, her throat screaming with pain. Am I? The woman laughed, high and shocked. You're the one who was just attacked. You should have let them hurt me. Should have stayed safe. But you didn't. She helped Xiomara to her feet, then turned to the gathering crowd, people who'd been watching from windows and doorways. She's real, the woman shouted. The new Luna. She's actually real. She saved me when she could have walked away. When it would have been safer to ignore me. She's real. The crowd murmured and Xiomara saw the shift. Saw suspicion turning to consideration. To respect. Mitchell studied her. We need to get your throat looked at. You're going to bruise badly. No, Xiomara said hoarsely. Let them see it. Let them see I'm willing to get hurt for them. That's what a Luna does, right? Protects the pack. All of it. Mitchell stared at her, then laughed roughly. Rainer's going to lose his mind when he sees you. But you're right. This will help your case. 2 days left. And Xiomara had just shown the lower districts that she wasn't just playing at being Luna. She was willing to bleed for it. In the castle, Rainer paced like a caged animal, his wolf howling to go to her. But he couldn't. Had to trust she'd survive. Had to trust that the woman he loved was strong enough to win her crown. The second day of the Widow's Walk brought more challenges, more people to help, more wounds to tend. Xiomara moved through the lower districts like a ghost made flesh, her bruised throat a badge of honor that made even the most skeptical residents pause. By sunset, she'd helped 60 families, settled a dozen disputes, and earned the grudging respect of people who'd hated her name just days before. But on the evening of the second day, as Xiomara was distributing medicine to sick children in the eastern slums, she noticed shadows following her. Not Mitchell. She learned to sense his protective presence. These shadows felt wrong. Predatory. She finished her work and headed toward the safe house, taking a deliberately winding route to see if the shadows would follow. They did. Xiomara's heart hammered as she turned down a narrow alley, then spun to face her pursuers. 3 men emerged from the darkness. Well-dressed, well-fed, nobility masquerading as commoners. Miss van der Vinny, the leader said, his voice cultured and cold. We have a message for you. From Elder Sylvian Burkhoff. Xiomara's blood turned to ice. Sylvian left the territory. Raynor banished him. Oh, he left, the man agreed, smiling cruelly. But his reach is long. And he wants you to know something very important. He pulled out a small painting, a miniature portrait, and held it up. Xiomara's father. Captured perfectly by an artist's hand. Your family is safe in the castle, the man continued. For now. But Elder Sylvian has friends everywhere. Guards who can be bribed. Servants who can be bought. And accidents happen so easily in large castles, don't they? A fall down the stairs. Poison in the food. A fire in the east wing. You wouldn't dare, Xiomara whispered, but her voice shook. We would, the man said simply. Unless you do exactly as Elder Sylvian commands. Tomorrow is the Blood Moon ceremony. Tomorrow, during the vote, you will stand before the pack and reject the Alpha King. Publicly. Completely. You will call him a tyrant. A monster. You will break the bond so thoroughly that he'll never come after you. And then you will leave the Northern Territories forever. And if I refuse? Xiomara asked, though she already knew. Then your father dies first, the man said. Slowly. Painfully. While your brothers watch. Then your brothers. Then that sweet little cousin in the Eastern District. Everyone you love will suffer because you were too selfish to let go of a crown you never deserved. He dropped the miniature portrait at her feet. You have until tomorrow night. Choose wisely, Miss van der Vinny. Your family's lives depend on it. The 3 men melted back into the shadows, leaving Xiomara standing alone in the alley, staring at her father's painted face. Mitchell appeared seconds later, weapon drawn. What happened? Who were those men? Sylvian, Xiomara said hollowly. He's going to kill my family if I don't reject Raynor at the ceremony. Then we tell Raynor. He'll increase security. He'll start a war, Xiomara interrupted. Don't you see? That's what Sylvian wants. If Raynor goes after him for this, it'll prove everything the council has been saying, that he's a tyrant who puts his personal desires above the pack's safety. It'll give them grounds to remove him. So what do? Mitchell asked quietly. Xiomara closed her eyes, feeling the bond humming in her chest, pulling her toward Raynor even now. Toward the man who'd promised her everything. Who'd been willing to give up his crown for her. And she knew there was only one choice. I have to let him go, she whispered. It's the only way to keep everyone safe. The 3rd day, Xiomara completed the widow's walk in a daze. She helped people mechanically, her mind elsewhere, her heart breaking with every hour that passed. People thanked her, blessed her, called her Luna with genuine respect. And all she could think was that it didn't matter. That tomorrow, she'd destroy it all. That night, she didn't return to the safe house. Instead, she went to the one place she'd been avoiding, the western slums where she'd grown up. The tiny, cramped home where her father still lived, now empty since Raynor had moved them to the castle. She sat on the stoop in the darkness and let herself cry for everything she was about to lose. I thought I'd find you here, a deep voice said. Xiomara's head snapped up. Raynor stood in the street, out of place in his fine clothes, his dark eyes soft with concern. You're not supposed to see me during the walk, Xiomara said, wiping her tears quickly. It breaks the rules. The walk is over, Raynor said. You finished. 3 days. You did it. He moved closer, sitting beside her on the stoop despite the filth. Mitchell told me what you accomplished. 97 families helped. 20 disputes settled. You saved 3 lives directly. The people are calling you the Luna of the Lowborn. They'll testify for you tomorrow. It doesn't matter, Xiomara said quietly. What do you mean? Xiomara looked at him, really looked at him, trying to memorize every detail. The scar on his jaw, the way his hair fell loose around his shoulders, the gentleness in eyes that had seen too much violence. "I love you," she said, and watched his eyes widen with shock and joy. "I should have said it sooner. Should have been brave enough to admit it. But I love you, Rainer. And that's why I have to let you go." "What are you talking about?" Rainer asked, his voice rough with confusion and fear. "Tomorrow," Xiomara said, standing up. "At the ceremony. I'm going to reject you. Publicly. Completely. And I need you to let me do it. Need you not to fight it. Not to come after me." "No," Rainer said, standing with her, his hands reaching for her. "No, whatever they threatened, whatever they said. They'll kill my family," Xiomara interrupted, her voice breaking. "Sylvian has people in the castle. Has ways to hurt them that you can't prevent. And if you go to war over this, the council will remove you. Either way, people die. Either way, everything we've built falls apart. Then we run," Rainer said desperately. "Like I said, we leave this all behind. And they still kill my family," Xiomara said. "They'll use them to draw you back. To force a confrontation. The only way everyone stays safe is if I go. If I reject you so thoroughly that you have no reason to keep protecting them." "I'll always protect them," Rainer said. "They're yours, which makes them mine." "Not if I'm gone," Xiomara said. "Not if I break the bond. Please, Rainer. I'm begging you. Tomorrow, when I reject you, let me. Don't fight. Don't follow. Let me save the people I love by walking away from the person I love most." Rainer was shaking his head, his hands fisted at his sides. I can't just watch you destroy us." "You have to," Xiomara said, and she reached up to cup his face one last time. "Because this is what Lunas do. They sacrifice for their pack. All of it. Even the alpha." She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it, all the love she'd been too scared to show, all the future they'd never have, all the pain of what she was about to do. When she pulled back, Rainer's eyes were devastated. "I'll find another way," he whispered. "I swear to you I'll find." "There is no other way," Xiomara said. She stepped back, breaking contact. "Goodbye, Rainer. Thank you for showing me what it felt like to be loved." Then she walked away into the darkness, leaving the Alpha King broken on the steps of a slum house, and didn't look back even though every step felt like dying. The Blood Moon ceremony was held in the Great Hall, packed with every wolf of rank in the Northern Territories. The massive space glowed red from ceremonial fires, and the air thrummed with tension. Rainer stood at the front in full armor, looking every inch the War King, though his eyes were hollow. The testimonies came first. Person after person from the lower districts standing to speak about what Xiomara had done during the Widow's Walk. How she'd helped them. Saved them. Proven herself worthy. The nobles shifted uncomfortably as the evidence mounted. Even some council members looked uncertain. Then Sylvian's replacement, Elder Corrine, a shrewd woman who'd once been neutral, stood to call the vote. "Before we proceed," Rainer's voice cut through the hall, rough and dangerous. "I want it known that I will abide by the Pack's decision. If they choose to remove me for claiming my fated mate, I'll step down without bloodshed. But I will not renounce her. Will not dishonor the Moon Goddess's choice. Xiomara van der Vinny is my Luna, and that will not change regardless of this vote." The hall erupted in whispers. Because Rainer was essentially offering to give up his crown rather than give up Xiomara. "How noble," a cold voice said from the back of the hall. Everyone turned. Xiomara stood in the doorway, dressed in the same simple peasant dress she'd worn during the walk, her bruised throat visible, her expression carefully blank. "Xiomara," Rainer breathed, and the hope in his voice was devastating. Xiomara walked down the center aisle, every eye on her, and stopped before the raised platform where Rainer stood. "Your Majesty," she said formally, and the distance in her voice made Rainer flinch. "Before this vote proceeds, I have something to say." "Xiomara, don't," Rainer started. "I reject you," Xiomara said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "I reject the bond. I reject your claim. I reject everything you offered me." The hall gasped. Raynor looked like she'd driven a blade through his heart. "I came to this castle as a servant," Xiomara continued, and her voice was steady even though tears streamed down her face. "I was nothing. Nobody. And you are a tyrant who sees people as possessions. Who destroys anyone who opposes you. Who would burn the kingdom rather than admit you were wrong." "That's not true," Raynor said hoarsely. "Xiomara, please." "I used you," Xiomara interrupted, and the lie tasted like poison on her tongue. "Saw an opportunity and took it. The bond isn't real. It's just powerful attraction that I manipulated. And I'm done pretending otherwise." Raynor was shaking his head, his eyes black with his wolf's fury and pain. "You're lying. Someone threatened you." "Someone." "No one threatened me," Xiomara said, meeting his eyes and willing him to understand. To see that she was doing this to save him. "I'm leaving because I want to. Because I realized I'd rather be free in the slums than trapped in your castle pretending to love a monster." The word monster echoed through the hall. And Raynor, strong, dangerous, undefeated Raynor, dropped to his knees. "Please," he said, and his voice broke. "Please don't do this. Whatever I did wrong, I'll fix it. Whatever you need." "I need you to let me go," Xiomara said, and it took everything she had to keep her voice steady. "I need you to accept that this was a mistake. That I was a mistake. And I need you to find a proper Luna who actually wants this life." She turned to face the crowd, to face the council. "I, Xiomara van der Vinny, formally reject Raynor Vrins as my mate. I renounce any claim to be Luna. And I ask that the pack allow me to leave in peace with my family." The hall was silent except for Raynor's ragged breathing. "This rejection is witnessed," Elder Corrine said quietly, though she looked troubled. "The bond is severed. The vote is unnecessary." She looked at Xiomara with something like pity. "You're free to go, child." Xiomara nodded once, then turned and walked back down the aisle. Past shocked nobles. Past crying servants who'd believed in her. Past Mitchell, whose expression was murderous because he knew this was a lie. She didn't look back at Raynor. Couldn't. Because if she did, she'd break. Would run back and take it all back and damn the consequences. So she walked out of the great hall, out of the castle, and into the winter night. Behind her, Raynor remained on his knees, his hands pressed to the stone floor, his body shaking with grief so profound his wolf was howling inside him. And in the shadows, Sylvian's botmen watched to make sure Xiomara actually left before disappearing to report their success. 3 months passed. Winter descended on the northern territories with brutal force, and the kingdom felt it. Raynor became a ghost of himself, ruling mechanically, speaking only when necessary, his eyes empty of everything except pain. He stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping, threw himself into border patrols and dangerous missions like he was trying to die. The castle fell into depression with him. Servants whispered about the curse of a rejected bond. Nobles who'd celebrated Xiomara's departure started to wonder if they'd made a terrible mistake, because their alpha king was dying slowly from heartbreak, and the kingdom was dying with him. Mitchell tried to make him eat. Hilda tried to make him rest. His beta wolves tried to make him fight. Nothing worked. "She's out there somewhere," Raynor would say, staring out at the frozen landscape. "I can feel her. The bond isn't actually broken." She lied. "Then go after her," Mitchell would say. "Find her. Bring her back." "She said she wanted to be free," Raynor would respond dully. "Said I was a monster." Maybe she was right. While Raynor deteriorated, Elder Sylvian saw his opportunity. He'd been gathering support quietly, building alliances, and when the kingdom was at its weakest, he made his move. On the night of the winter solstice, Sylvian returned with an army of loyalists and challenged for the throne. Not through ritual combat, Raynor would destroy him in a fight, but through political maneuvering. He'd gotten enough council members and noble houses to back him that he could legally claim the Alpha King was unfit to rule. The confrontation happened in the throne room. Sylvian stood before Raynor's throne, flanked by armed wolves, and smiled coldly. You've proven what we all feared, Sylvian said. That you're too weak to lead. Too emotional. You nearly destroyed this kingdom over an Omega servant, and you're still so broken by her rejection that you can barely function. Step down peacefully, Raynor. Let someone strong enough to rule take over. Raynor looked at him with dead eyes. Is this what you wanted? What breaking us accomplished? I wanted to save the kingdom from your foolishness, Sylvian said. The girl is gone. You're broken. And now the crown passes to someone worthy. Mitchell moved to defend his alpha, but Raynor raised a hand, stopping him. If you want the crown, Raynor said quietly, take it. I don't have the strength to fight anymore. Sylvian's smile widened. He stepped forward, reaching for the crown on Raynor's head. And that's when the moon goddess intervened. The windows exploded inward with silver light. Every wolf in the room was forced to their knees by divine pressure. And a voice, ancient, powerful, feminine, filled the air. Sylvian Burkhoff. The elder collapsed completely, his face pressed to the stone, terror clear in his eyes. You severed a fated bond. Threatened innocence. Corrupted the sacred laws of mate bonds for political gain. And now you reach for a crown you were never meant to wear. Please, Sylvian gasped. Goddess, I was protecting. Silence. The silver light focused on Sylvian, and he screamed. Not in pain, but in loss. In horror. Because his wolf, his spirit, his connection to the divine, was being stripped away. When the light faded, Sylvian collapsed on the floor, gasping. Human. Completely human. The thing he despised most. You will live, the voice said, fading. But you will live as what you hated. And all will know your shame. Then the presence vanished, leaving stunned silence. Raynor stared at the human shell that had once been an elder, and something finally broke through his depression. Rage. Pure, burning rage. You did this, Raynor said, his voice deadly quiet. You threatened her family. Forced her to reject me. Tore us apart for power. Sylvian tried to crawl away, but Raynor was faster. He grabbed the former elder by the throat and lifted him. Where is she? Raynor demanded. Where did she go? I don't know, Sylvian choked out. She disappeared into the human lands. I swear I don't know. Raynor threw him across the room. Mitchell. Find her. Search every village, every town, every goddamned hovel in the territories. Find Xiomara. Bring her home. Already on it, Mitchell said, and he was smiling for the first time in months. It took 2 weeks of searching before they found her. In a tiny village at the edge of the territories, working in a bakery, surviving on scraps and kindness, and the hope that her sacrifice had kept everyone safe. Raynor rode alone to find her, leaving his guards behind. He needed to do this right. The bakery was small and warm, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. And there she was, thinner than he remembered, exhausted, her hands covered in flour, but alive. Still alive. She was wearing something around her neck. A small token on a leather cord. The silver wolf medallion he'd given her their first week together, when he'd been trying to court her properly. She'd kept it. Even after everything. She'd kept it. The bakery owner saw him first, and nearly fainted at the sight of the Alpha King in her shop. Your Majesty, But Raynor wasn't looking at her. Was staring at Xiomara, who'd frozen at the sound of his title, her eyes wide with shock and fear and desperate, painful hope. Everyone out, Raynor said quietly. Now. The bakery emptied in seconds. Raynor and Xiomara stood facing each other across the flour-dusted workspace, 3 months of grief and longing and love between them. You lied, Raynor said, his voice rough. At the ceremony. You lied to protect your family. Xiomara's eyes filled with tears. I had to. He was going to kill them. Was going to make you look like a tyrant for defending them. I had to choose. You chose them over yourself, Raynor interrupted. Chose to break your own heart to save people you loved. Chose to call me a monster even though it was killing you. He moved closer. That's what a Luna does. That's what you did. And I was too broken to see it. Too lost in my own pain to protect you properly. Rainer. He dropped to his knees in the flour and dirt, the Alpha King prostrating himself before an Omega Baker, and bowed his head. I failed you, Rainer said, his voice cracking. Failed to keep you safe. Failed to see what Sylvian was doing. Failed to stop your pain. And I am begging on my knees, in the dirt, for you to forgive me. To come home. Not as my servant. Not even as my Luna if you don't want that anymore. Just come home. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the gift the moon goddess gave me. Xiomara was crying openly now. Your kingdom means nothing without you, Rainer said, looking up at her with eyes full of love and desperation. I meant it then, and I mean it now. The crown, the throne, all of it, I would trade it all for one more day with you. One more chance to make you smile. Xiomara dropped to her knees in front of him, her hands cupping his face. I never stopped loving you. Never stopped wanting you. Even when I was saying those terrible things, even when I was walking away. I know, Rainer said, pulling her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he'd never let go. I felt it through the bond. Felt you dying inside while you saved everyone else. They held each other on the bakery floor, both crying, both healing, the bond between them blazing back to life stronger than ever. Come home, Rainer whispered against her hair. Please, Xiomara. Come home and be my Luna. My mate. My equal. Help me rebuild this kingdom into something worthy of you. What about the council? Xiomara asked. The nobles who hate me? Gone, Rainer said. Replaced. Reformed. I spent the last 3 months tearing down everything that made you unsafe. Rewrote the laws. Dismantled the pure blood requirements. Built a council of wolves who actually care about the pack's welfare, not just politics. He pulled back to look at her. The kingdom you left isn't the kingdom you're returning to. Because I refuse to rule a place that would reject someone like you. Xiomara searched his face and saw the truth there. Saw the changes he'd made. Saw the man who'd literally reshaped his world to make space for her in it. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll come home. I'll be your Luna. Your mate. Your partner in all of this. Rainer kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of 3 months of longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he stood and pulled her up with him. There's one more thing, Rainer said, a smile finally breaking across his face. Your family has been waiting. Your father threatened to ride out here himself if I didn't bring you back. Xiomara laughed through her tears. He did not. He absolutely did, Rainer said. Turns out your father is terrifying when his daughter is missing. I can see where you get your spine. They rode back together, Xiomara on Rainer's horse with his arms around her, and when they crested the hill overlooking the castle, Xiomara gasped. The entire kingdom had turned out. Thousands of wolves lining the road into the castle, and they were cheering, chanting her name. Luna Xiomara. Luna Xiomara. They know what you did, Rainer said quietly in her ear. Mitchell made sure everyone learned the truth. How you sacrificed yourself to save the kingdom from war. How you rejected me to protect people who would have died for politics. They know you're a hero, Xiomara. And they want their Luna back. The cheers grew louder as they passed. Lower district wolves crying with joy. Nobles bowing respectfully. Even the new council members standing in honor. And at the castle gates, Xiomara's entire family waited, her father's eyes streaming with tears as he saw her alive and safe. 6 months later, Xiomara and Rainer were married in the same great hall where they'd first seen each other. But this time, it was filled with wolves from every rank, nobles standing beside servants, highborn she-wolves dancing with Omega males, the kingdom united under a Luna who'd proven that worth came from the heart, not the bloodline. Rainer pulled Xiomara close as they danced, his lips against her ear. Are you happy? Deliriously, Xiomara said, smiling up at him. Though I still can't believe this is real sometimes. Believe it, Rainer said, spinning her gently. You're my Luna, my mate, the love of my life. And I'm going to spend every day making sure you never doubt that again. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, someone in the crowd called out, laughing, and Xiomara recognized the baker from the village, beaming at her with pride. Comment where you're watching from, another voice added. The Luna wants to say hello. Xiomara laughed, the sound bright and free, and looked around at the faces watching them, her pack, all of them, from the lowest Omega to the highest-ranked warriors, united and whole. Hello, she called out, her voice carrying through the hall. To all of you, thank you for believing in us, for showing me what it means to be Luna, for proving that love can change everything. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Rainer pulled her close again, his eyes dark with emotion. You changed everything, he said. You changed me, and I will love you until the moon falls from the sky. Good, Xiomara said, pulling him down for a kiss. Because I'm not going anywhere ever again. And in the castle that had once felt like a prison, the Alpha King and his Luna danced surrounded by their pack, their love story complete, their kingdom reformed, their future bright with possibility. The end.